I've been thinking about Marion Tavares a lot lately. She's the new Guardian investigator from the Drowned City who has this really intriguing ability that triggers on playing events. I already like event cards in this game, but stapling an extra card draw and a free play of another event makes them that much better. Now, a lot of people are excited about cards like Ready for Anything, which lets her draw even more cards, but since she looks like a fighter, my mind has wandered towards the clue end of the Guardian card pool. I figure there's going to be a lot of discussion about the fighting events in Marion, but the Guardian class has a lot of interesting choices for how to pick up clues, but which one should you take, if any? It turns out that, especially in the Guardian class, the answer neatly aligns with what kind of Guardian archetype you want to play, and this is true not just of Marion. Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and this is the beginning of a short series here on Quick Learner about efficient clue getting in Arkham Horror the card game, focusing on events. Today, of course, I'm going to focus on the Guardian events, but in time I'll hit up on all the other classes as well. So, let's set up some justifications. Why clue events? There are other ways to get clues after all. You can take a basic investigate, commit a skill card or two, or use a more dedicated asset like Field Agent. But especially for investigators who don't focus on clue getting, unlike assets, events don't require any investment to set up. Either you have the card in your hand and you'll play it, getting its full value immediately, or you don't have the card and there's nothing lost if you don't end up getting any clues. Even better, there's no slot requirement either for these cards. They don't need to compete with your weapons or allies in play, they just need to take up a spot in your deck. Next, for the most part, clue events are testless. This means that they are not investigations, so they circumvent high shrouds, treacheries that block investigations, or haunted effects. This is really valuable in most teams, but especially in lower player counts, where your clue event solves that location entirely, without the need for any investigate actions. Many clue events get 2 clues for 1 card. For a 2-player, the majority of locations have just 2 clues. Consider how many actions it can save the team if other players don't need to waste their time going to a location that is otherwise a dead end. In solo, these events can usually solve the few locations that have twice as many clues. Often these locations have victory points. That said, it's not a bad idea to use these events at higher player counts too. Someone else might have a similar event, or even just saving a cluever from spending their whole turn on one location can be valuable. Wait, why am I getting clues again as a fighter? Well, not every Guardian is going to solely concentrate on fighting enemies, but even if so, getting clues generally progresses the game, and the faster, the better. So there's nothing wrong with everyone pitching in to the overall total of clues the team is picking up. A minimal investment of 2 cards in your fighting deck to get clues is unlikely to affect your ability to fight all the enemies. As we'll see shortly, for Guardians especially, these events usually require the presence of enemies anyways, which means you're not bending your deck or play pattern out of shape to get clues. In some scenarios, care about investigators having their own clues, either to progress the game or as protection from treacheries. Now, as the campaign progresses, the importance of your fighters being able to pick up clues likely diminishes as the efficiency of your clue getters increases exponentially, so don't feel bad about dropping these cards by scenario 6 or so, but it definitely depends on your team composition. So, let's go through the very small list of clue options for Guardians. I expect that we'll see something new in the Drowned City, given Marion's ability, but for now, there's only 7 cards, and their upgrades. I'll discuss each one's strengths and weaknesses and give a recommendation of which archetypes might want to play it. It's up to you to decide what style will fit best in your next group that you take through a campaign. Let's start with the original, Evidence, and its upgrade from Nathaniel Cho's starter deck. A clue for doing what you're already doing and doesn't interfere with being able to fight the enemies is excellent. And it's very cheap and doesn't even cost an action either. It only gives 1 clue, which might not be enough in higher player counts to warrant a deck slot, so let's take a look at the level 1 too. The upgrade is cheap, but needs a little work to get full value. 1 resource fast for 2 clues is well above the curve for 1 XP, so try to make it work. Some campaigns do have more 4 health enemies than others, but you could also defeat 2 2-health enemies instead, or something similar, rewarding some thinking ahead and fancy play. But Don't be afraid to just play the upgrade for one clue if discovering a clue right now solves other problems. Any Guardian who defeats enemies actively is happy to play this. There's obvious synergies with how Roland Banks plays the game already, but I think Marion will love playing a fast card into another fast card. Scene of the Crime. This card is from the Forgotten Age. 2 resources for 2 clues at level 0 is a really good rate, even with the limitations. The bold requirement to be played only as your first action can be engineered. Try using Safeguard, On the Hunt, Let Me Handle This, or others. However, it does eat into your turn for dealing with the enemy, unlike Evidence, but this is usually not that important. You should be able to take care of the enemy with your remaining few actions. The backup mode of getting 1 clue with no enemy around is fine too. This is probably the most playable of the bunch across all situations, since you don't even need to be the one who deals with the enemy afterwards, so you can add Carson Sinclair and Carolyn Fern to the mix. I'd play this in any Guardian, but if you're sick of playing it, there's some other options that are fine too. Interrogate came out in the Circle Undone and has had a little bit more support. And the Taboo also eliminated the humanoid enemy requirement. It's now only for non-elites, but you're still going to need an enemy around. So this is going to fit better into a deck that has other parlay support, like Fine Clothes. The effect is pretty good, especially in true solo, since you're getting single clues from multiple locations on the board, but the test is not always easy. Consider that Evidence is fast and doesn't require you to make another test other than however you dealt with the enemy. You really want to get value out of that additional remote clue here. Think about it if you're playing solo Nathaniel Cho or Mark Harrigan, maybe put it into a parlay-oriented Parallel Roland. Otherwise, it's asking a bit too much. Speaking of Nathaniel Cho again, Lesson Learned 2 came out in his starter deck as well. 1 resource, fast, for 2 clues is a great rate. You'll just need to get attacked and take damage. It won't work with horror-only enemies. This is much easier to engineer than Evidence 1. It can be off an attack of opportunity or a hunter attack, but of course, you might as well just go all the way and lean into the Thorns archetype with other cards too, like Guard Dog or Toe to Toe. This is a solid option in Tommy Muldoon, who can definitely play that Thorns archetype well. Edge of the Earth brought us On the Trail 1 and its level 3 upgrade. They are in the Seeker class as well, but these cards do appeal to Guardians due to, just like everything else we've seen so far, the enemy condition. The cards are expensive for their XP cost, but movement can be valuable to get to enemies several locations away. While there's a lot of value to be had, it can be hard to get the right board state, and it's better if only getting 1 clue from each location is sufficient, which to me sounds like a true solo player or a flex in 3 or 4 player. Roland seems ideal again, since he can get the last clue from just defeating the enemy at the end of the trail. The next few cards are from the Feast of Hemlock Vale, and they're different. Enemies are not really part of the equation anymore. First, Task Force. Only 1 clue out of the card, but there's a lot of other value here to support the team with your 2 actions that you spend to play the card. The clue, of course, doesn't even have to go to you, which may or may not be important. It's definitely a card that shines in more of a support role, where the impact is magnified by the strength of what you can do with that activate action and moving the team around out of turn order. If you squint a little bit, it's similar to Evidence, but the clue discovery is not restricted to defeating an enemy. You just get it. Give it a try in your support Carson or Sister Mary deck. Last card is Guided by Faith. Unlike all the other cards we've seen today, this is actually an investigation and requires a test. It's strange to think that this is the first investigate action printed on a Guardian card in the whole game's lifespan. It can discover up to 2 clues, but not knowing how many clues you'll discover when you take the test isn't great. Of course, it is a good card for token manipulation and bless support otherwise, and as such, probably not suited to Guardians outside of Sister Mary. Don't sleep on adding the 2 blesses to the bag, it's what makes the card playable. Okay, one last card. As an honorable mention, breach the door from the Scarlet Keys. You take an easy test with the aim of lowering the shroud as much as possible. The card doesn't get any clues by itself, but it can turn anyone's investigate action into a clue later, especially if you reduce the shroud to 0. It's definitely better in higher player counts or with locations with many, many clues, and has some good synergy with the Scarlet Keys campaign itself. Well, that's it. While it sounds like a lot of these cards are niche and have restrictions on them, in practice they're not heavily weighing on the deck since those caveats are already accounted for in your team composition or the identity of the Guardian you're already playing. Are you a support deck? Try out Task Force. Planning on getting punched a lot in the face? It's gotta be lesson learned. You're on Team Bless? Throw in Guided by Faith. While a few of these events are more generally playable, I recommend trying them all out once in different decks. As for Marion, while I bet we'll get something new for her, I'm intrigued by playing Scene of the Crime, since the second card you play after it during your turn will not occur an attack of opportunity either. Next up, I'll tackle the Survivor class, which has a similarly limited number of clue events. See you then, and thanks for watching.